Hey friends, welcome back to Hot Air with me, Joshua Robert. This is the podcast where we say the quiet part out loud, we unpack big feelings, and occasionally stir the pot for personal growth. If you've been listening for a while, you know that we've spent a lot of time talking about how religion has been used against the LGBTQ plus community. Conversion therapy, spiritual abuse, shame that is disguised as love. It's been really heavy this December. It's been important, but very heavy. And after sitting with all of that, I really wanted to create space for something else because while religion has hurt a lot of us, that is not the full story. So today, we're talking about the other side of faith. And if you're wondering why you can't see me if you're on YouTube, intro and outro today will have no visual of me, but the meat of the episode, the interview, will have the visual. So don't worry, me and my guest are coming, okay? But in this episode, I am joined by a pastor from an LGBTQ plus affirming church to explore inclusive Christianity, queer theology, trans theology, and what it looks like when faith actually welcomes queer people instead of pushing them out. We get into same sex relationships in scripture, gender beyond the binary, eunuchs, Adam before gender. Yes, we're getting biblical and we're getting very gay about it. This conversation is about what happens when LGBTQ plus folks are affirmed, celebrated, and fully seen as spiritual people without having to shrink themselves or apologize for who they are. Whether you left religion behind, or you're cautiously curious, or just want proof that faith doesn't have to be traumatic, this is the episode for you. And of course, quick housekeeping before we get into it. The audio is a little bit wonky sometimes. I don't know why, but there's a little bit of an echo in my voice. So, I apologize for that in advance. But I think you can look past that and look at the quality of the message that we're trying to share. And there is truly no rhyme or reason for it. There's no demons, no Mercury in retrograde, just podcasting, baby. This is what happens in podcasting. And again, before we get started, if you love Hot Air, make sure you're following me on social media on Instagram and TikTok at _Hot Air Pod. Share this with someone who you feel needs to hear it. And you can also submit your listener stories or topic suggestions and shop my merch on my website, hotairwithjoshuarobert.com, because healing is great, but healing in a cute hoodie designed by me and repping the podcast is even better. Okie dokie. Take a breath, unclench your jaw, take a pause, and let's get into it. You ready? We're good?
I think so. Ready or not, here I come.
This is it. We have to be ready because we're rolling.
That's it.
Because we're good. Okay, well, today we have Pastor Ali, who is located here in San Diego. So thank you and welcome to Hot Air.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Me too. I think you've kind of browsed maybe my Instagram or some of my December episodes, and I think it's really important to share your perspective here because, frankly, I've been talking by myself this whole month about things I've been researching and the Bible and Jesus and misinterpretations, and then I realized I'm like, this is actually really heavy stuff, and a lot of course, what I'm talking about directly affects the LGBTQ plus community, and I was like, I need somebody who knows this stuff inside and out, who knows it better than I do and comes from a church that is affirming and welcoming. And of course, I wanted to stay local here in San Diego. So I'm very grateful that you were so willing to have a conversation with me. I honestly wasn't sure if anybody would want to because some of my episodes have some pretty hot takes about a lot of things, but I'm an open book. And so here we are. So I'm really excited for your knowledge and your perspective. I think it's going to be very valuable. And I always like to start off with learning a little bit about you before we even get into the meat of the stuff. I think it's important that myself and listeners get to know you a little bit. So you can tell us whatever you want to and whatever you don't want to.
Wow. I wasn't expecting this question.
Oh, well, welcome.
Yeah. I am a Southern California native. So I was born and raised in the Inland Empire. and have lived most of my life in San Diego, except for like a brief jaunt to New Orleans, Louisiana for about 5 years, and then a couple years in Bellingham. I never expected to get called as a pastor, really. And I also, for many years of my life, didn't realize how fabulous women were until I'm one of those who came out late, kind of in my 30s. And then I realized, oh my goodness, I'm in love with my best friend.
Oh,
Um,
juicy.
so, yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it's been an interesting journey, but also a really fabulous one as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So how
Um,
did you, when you kind of realized that you were being called to be a pastor, what did that look like to you? Because from going to that not even being on your radar to where you are now is a big jump.
in the beginning, I was looking at chaplaincy, and a part of that came from my personal history. I lost a best friend to suicide when I was in college. And so it became very important for me personally to find ways where I could help people connect to hope. And so the whole profession of chaplaincy and showing up for people at times of crisis and struggle in their lives was really appealing to me. And so when I enrolled in Claremont School of Theology, I never expected to pastor a church. I just wanted to get trained to be a good chaplain, and then wanted to be able to go work, um, somewhere in the medical field, or uh, in some other setting where I could be available during difficult or challenging times. So that actually was my first career. I worked as a hospice chaplain for Elizabeth Hospice in North County, like in Escondido,
Mm-hmm.
for 3 years. But then they had a series of layoffs. And when I lost that job, there were some people around me, leaders in this denomination, who kind of looked at me and said to me, have you ever thought about being a pastor? Maybe that's something you want to look at. So I started thinking about it as a possibility. Like so many times in our lives, it just seems like some doors are closed at times and
Mm-hmm.
others are starting to open. So I took some risks and said yes to God and the universe.
Love that. And here you are.
And here I am.
And did you grow up in the church in a religious household?
I grew up sort of, my mother had this idea that she didn't want me to be raised in the church. She wanted me to have an understanding about religion when I got older, but she didn't want me to feel like choices were made for me.
Right.
She wanted me to be thinking about my own beliefs and my own journey and what made sense for me. So I was very blessed in that way. She's one of these people that when she was a kid, she was taken to a church where the pastor was very scary and preached a lot about hell and fire and brimstone,
Mm-hmm.
and she was terrified. And so she did not want me to have anything resembling that kind of experience. So I was very lucky in that I had some experiences at like the local Lutheran church. But then at a certain point, I left because that was the Missouri Synod branch of the Lutheran church, and they really didn't believe in women speaking, like women uh, reading the scripture, even,
Mm.
right, or preaching. And even though I didn't think of myself as having a calling, I really felt that was wrong.
Right.
So I thought, well, I don't need to be connected to the church and these kinds of sexist teachings. I'm just
Yeah, for
gonna
sure.
step away. Hmm.
Yeah. Wow. I like that. I like that your mom did that. My mom was very similar where I was baptized, but like we didn't really go to church. And then when I was in grade 7, I actually started going to church with my music teacher, me and a group of our friends. And it was actually really fun. It was very welcoming. It was before I really knew how I identified, of course. So I didn't really know a lot about the church. But after that, it was kind of like, there was no religion in my life. I think that I have a good relationship for me that works for me with the universe or God or however we want to refer to it. But I like that you weren't like kind of forced into something. It kind of found you, right?
Yeah, I
Which
was
feels authentic, more authentic.
absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I consider myself very lucky to have had that experience.
Yeah. You are a pastor in an LGBTQ plus affirming church, right? And you can correct me if
Yes.
anything I'm saying is off or wrong. So, what does affirming actually mean in practice?
So, I thought this question was interesting because for me, like I tend to think of an affirming church as a church that at some point realized we want to open our doors to the LGBT community, and we want people to feel like they can be accepted and seen as the people they are, which I think is a beautiful journey. I'm so glad that churches have done that. But our own denomination was founded by this gay minister who was kicked out of his denomination. Reverend Elder Troy Perry, like in 1968, kind of started our denomination, like as a gay man,
Hmm.
specifically to reach out to our community. And so I think because of that, I see the way our church is as more celebrating than accepting.
Okay.
And for me, like the difference is, I'll give you an example. When I was pastoring at the MCC church in New Orleans, one of my congregants was transitioning. And so she and I worked on a naming ceremony for her. And, we came up with words and a ritual that were really meaningful for her to be like baptized with her name on a Sunday
Hmm.
morning. And so that's the kind of like religious ritual that, for her that was so powerful because it was about more than like naming or proclaiming a relationship between her and God. It was
Right.
also about being affirmed in her transition and as this new person that she had become. So it was so meaningful to all of us.
Right. That sounds nice. Isn't it? It's so much easier to be affirming and welcoming and inclusive. Like it takes so much more energy to exclude people and, speak negatively about them, whether they're trans or wherever they fall in the LGBTQ plus alphabet. It's just much easier to just welcome people in and celebrate. Like you said, I love that. It's a celebration as opposed to like condemning people for just being.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that people can like feel free to be their authentic selves instead of
Hmm.
thinking that they have to present themselves in a certain way. Because I think sometimes, because there's been judgment in the past, that a lot of times, like people in our community, like we'll carry that with us when we go into churches,
Yes.
especially when we don't know. Like we don't know who's sitting next to us and what does that person think?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think we carry that throughout life at the grocery store, at Home Depot, or wherever it is. But definitely in the church, I was thinking about this while I was driving today. How different everyone's relationship with religion, how everyone in the queer community's relationship with religion would be if when I was growing up, it was more welcoming and celebratory and affirming, and we hear more stories like I'm trying to share today. People are going to maybe be a little bit more inclined to kind of step into their relationship with whatever higher being it is that they
Oh,
believe in.
yes.
Yeah, it's much easier if people are nice. Moral of the episode. Okay, so because I've done all of these episodes that, do share the negative side of religion, conversion therapy, all those things. Why do you think it's so important to share these positive stories right now, especially within the queer community, but as a whole? Why do you feel that it's important that we talk about these positive sides of religion?
I think there's recently been this political and cultural pushback against our community, like just evidence of transphobia and homophobia I think that it's really important because of that, that progressive religious communities, progressive Christian communities have a voice, and
Mhm.
that we're out there advocating for what Jesus actually taught, right? That we love others as we love ourselves. That and so for me, that's such an important point in continuing to move forward into
Mhm.
having a world where we are kind to one another and we can
Right.
be ourselves in a genuine way. I wanted to share with you that I listened to your podcast that
Mhm.
was about Jesus as like the OG
Mhm.
LGBT
OG
ally.
ally,
And I,
yeah.
yes, and I was totally like 100% in agreement. I was listening to it
Good,
going,
okay.
yes, yes,
Good.
100% yes.
Because these are things that I've been very defensive about, where I'm just like, I on some of that my episodes, I'm like, God, Bible thumpers, and they just say these terrible things, and like I take a very stern stance because there's so much of that negativity. And then in December, I was like, this is a great opportunity for it to me at least explore it more and explore the stories more. And as I was doing this research and reading more, I was just like, everything that I've, been, I guess, taught or absorbing from groups that use religion for negativity is like so not the case. And I'm like, that's why I was like, Jesus is the OG ally. Like, he's the opposite of what a lot of people hold him up to be nowadays, or use him as more of a weapon. And I'm just like, I don't get it. But now I do, because I've been, trying to read about it. And then in the middle of it, I'm like, I'm a preacher right now. Like, I didn't even realize this was the direction December was gonna take me. It's quite mind blowing for me. If you knew me outside of, the few episodes, you'd be probably very surprised that I'm even talking about all of this. But, we're on a good roll here. But
It's
that's kind of
great.
like kind of a good segue into the negative impact that religion lately, we kind of touched on it a little bit, has had on the queer community. Why do you think, or maybe you have some insight or an opinion to offer, why do you think that people have been using religion as more of a weapon towards the queer community, more so, in the last maybe 2 years, I would think, than usual? Or maybe it's just more apparent?
I think that um, minority groups of people are convenient targets for scapegoating,
Hmm.
and that scapegoating is a way that people can try to grab more power for themselves or maintain more power and control. So I think it becomes easy for some of these mega church movements, some of these particular Christian movements to get connected to certain political leaders where the story is really about um, control.
I feel like when I think about that, I'm like, these churches are already in power. The people that are in power are already in power. How much more power can you want? And is the queer community really tipping the scales of power that much? Like, there's so much other stuff they could talk about, or so many other directions. The people that follow them are already following them. The people that line their pocketbooks already line their pocketbooks. So I'm like, what makes us so threatening, other than being, a minority group that celebrates pride, that stands up when we need to, but I don't think we'd be so defensive against churches if they hadn't taken this rhetoric in the first place.
Yeah, I think that sometimes it's about, trying to scare people, right? That if if something is different, if it um if it seems outside of our understanding, that could be scary.
Mhm.
Um I
Yeah,
I
it just kinda
mean,
keeps people in line, I guess, right? Yeah, if
yeah.
they've
I
got a
mean,
little fear.
I'm not enough of an expert in terms of the social sciences and history and
Me
the
neither.
political context,
Yeah.
but I do see like the harm that religious teachings have done to our community, that it's so harmful to for people to internalize judgment and hatred, and to see themselves as less than, to see themselves as
Mhm.
unworthy. And I think it's really important that we get healed from that so that we can thrive in our lives and have, really authentic, loving relationships and joy. And
Right.
I think that's what we were created for.
Yeah, I agree. Do you have any members of your church that share any of the perspectives on current events or their own personal experiences, maybe seeing the negative side of religion? I imagine it would be very interesting to go to your church where it's welcoming and affirming and celebratory, and then maybe outside of their experiencing the opposite of that. Do they ever share those experiences with you?
I think a lot of people that come to our church have been to other churches. So, not everybody, but many people that come to our church have had some kind of background. And one of the things that's interesting about our church is that it's very ecumenical. Like, there are people who consider themselves recovering Catholics. There are people that were raised in the Baptist tradition. There's people that went to Protestant churches. And so we're kind of coming together from these various backgrounds of different types of experiences. And sometimes that makes for really interesting conversations because
Hmm.
we do have some differences in in our theology and our perspectives about things. But it's actually one of the things that I love about our church because I feel like that diversity um, helps people to grow.
Right.
And I think diversity is a wonderful thing. I think it's exciting.
Hmm. I mean, diversity, we're never getting away from it. So why try to, avoid it or go the opposite direction? It's only going to keep getting more and more diverse everywhere in every aspect of life. I
Oh,
was
that's true.
curious because I did an episode about conversion therapy, several that kind of dived into different aspects of it. I'm not sure if you have any experience with that or have ever met anybody that's been to any type or any form because there's a broad spectrum of what that can look like. So I guess do have you had any experience with somebody that has gone to any form of conversion therapy?
So our former pastor here who retired recently, he experienced that being sent for conversion therapy. And I've also known other people who have. I'm fortunate that I've never been through that
Hmm.
myself, but I also know that the the impact that that has on people can be, pretty long lasting. And he shared pretty openly about how painful it was to be told that he could pray the gay away, and
Hmm.
then for years um, that he spent praying and trying not to have feelings of attraction for other men, trying to be different and being told that it was because he didn't have enough faith or he somehow wasn't doing the right things. It's just to me pretty devastating.
Yeah, I think a part of my question was, what do people misunderstand about conversion therapy? But I feel like that answer kind of answers it, how the long lasting effects that it's not just you're being sent somewhere to learn something new. You're literally trying to pray the gay away. And it's some people never recover from it. Some people don't survive literally. And some people it takes their entire life to kind of feel whole again, which is, I can't imagine, very difficult for somebody who comes from a religious family. So you said the word theology before, and I've been hearing that a lot lately in my December deep dive. So, what is, for anyone hearing that word for the first time, what is queer theology, or maybe just theology? However, you feel it's best to explain.
So, theology, the way it was explained to me, is just how you talk about God or how you talk about the way you understand your spirituality. If you want to look at it from a broader perspective. So it could be like how you define spirituality, what spirituality means to you. So that's basically what theology is. For me, queer theology is like looking for those stories in scripture that don't fit what we're told is the norm.
Hmm.
Looking for the voices of the like the lesser known characters
Hmm.
that are there in the story, or the people that are just overlooked. Like they're there in the scripture, but that like they don't get talked about.
Right.
And so I think that kind of also goes along with the notion of liberation theology to a certain extent. Like you're looking to find the people who have been overlooked and unseen, and to hear them and to see them and to see like what their spiritual journey is about.
Okay, that makes more sense. So, and you kind of touched on it. I imagine that those lesser known characters also probably represent a much broader demographic than, those main characters that we know. So, are there any hints, I suppose, to like same sex relationships, queer themes in scripture that people do overlook? And would you please share them with me? Because I need to know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, one of the prime examples that I am aware of is this love story between King David and Jonathan that's in the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament, and it's in First and Second Samuel, and it's really pretty steamy. I mean, it's very much like there's a scene where there's like actual undressing, and like there's it is very like, at the risk of actually like quoting scripture, like if I were to read a little bit of it to you, if you're open to that,
Yeah.
you'll kind of hear like uh just the words of love, right? There's so for example, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. So that's just like an example. I'm
Hmm.
looking for the place where Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic and even his sword, his bow, and his belt. So it's when you actually read their story, if you're not looking through it at it through the lens of like a straight person, you're like, wow,
Right.
I see two gay men like in love with each other.
And like, I mean, I've never heard that before. So that's probably not spoken about very much in, your everyday regular quote unquote church. And that I would imagine is intentional. Do you think? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's like their relationship is kind of explained away as just a really powerful friendship. But like how many friendships do you make covenants with?
Right.
Like covenant is a different type of word. So I just think that there's a lot of things that in order for it to fit into a certain narrative, people will just de-emphasize that part of the story, and
Hmm.
they won't bring it up in church or talk about it.
Are
Yeah.
there any other parts in the Bible or scripture that might hint on those themes at all?
Oh, absolutely. So there's this relationship between Ruth and Naomi, which is interesting because this is a story that involves two women, and what is ironic about it is that like these words that Ruth speaks to Naomi like have been quoted at like straight weddings for years, but it's one woman speaking to another woman,
Mm.
and she's saying, where you go I will go, and where you stay I will stay, your people will be my people and your God my God. So it's she makes this vow, Ruth makes
Hmm.
this vow to Naomi. So it's kind of, even though these stories are not like, they're not they're set in a different time and in a different context, so we can't place our modern interpretations
Right.
on everything, but it's definitely, you hear something there
Right.
that doesn't get brought up often at traditional churches in the way that we can hear it,
Hmm.
where we
Well,
hear like same-sex love and affection being expressed.
right. Well, I'm gonna write down that vow for my second wedding. I actually really like that. I think that's really cool. I've never
That's
knew that.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really nice. That's really neat. Transitioning a little bit to gender as a little bit more of a focus. How does the Bible complicate, or maybe it doesn't complicate, the idea that gender is strictly binary. And I believe in your email, you kind of touched on how there were some things you wanted to talk about here.
Yes. One of our scholars, who is a transgender clergy person, Reverend Justin Tanis, writing about the story in Genesis 2, where, and this is probably a story that you've heard before, where Adam is lonely and is in the garden, and God, or Yahweh, removes Adam's rib to create Eve. And what Reverend Tanis says is, if you think about it and you look at what that scripture is saying, that actually Adam, before this removal of the rib, potentially has these two genders, right? Is potentially male and female, or on some spectrum, right? Is there's the possibility that the first human is intersex.
Okay. Wow.
So I think most people wouldn't think of it that way. And
Right.
if you've never heard that theory, I think most, like, some people kind of go, really? But at the same time, like, if you look at that story from the eyes of somebody that has transitioned, that is a transition of gender that's happening,
That's really cool.
isn't it?
I feel like that just blew my mind a little bit. A lot of things that you're saying and a lot of things I'm learning this month, I'm just like, what? Is there anything else that kind of blends or blurs the male female gender norms that we know today?
I think you, in your podcast that you just did, you mentioned the eunuchs that
Yeah.
Jesus talks about in Matthew. And I think the eunuchs are also kind of fit into this category because even though a lot of them were being castrated, and were servants, the way that Jesus talks about some eunuchs being born that way, some choosing to be that way, kind of implies that there's this categories of people that are different, that haven't been forced into that role, that there's something different about their gender and how their gender is presented. So I just think, I mean, there's a lot, I would say, more detailed explanations about eunuchs and the role uh, of those biblical times, but um, I think what you said in your podcast made a lot of sense.
Okay.
To be able to see this as Jesus saying, like, this is a positive and affirming message. I love the people that are different. I'm not standing in judgment of them. I see them and accept them and celebrate them for who they are.
And when I was researching that episode, I know I've heard the word eunuch before, but then, in research, I'm like, what actually is it? And to be quite honest, I still don't really know. So can you help me and probably everyone else listening understand exactly what that is?
Um, I can try. It's not really my level of expertise. Let me just start off with
That's
that.
all right.
But there were servants who were castrated, because it was a way of protecting. Like, if you were going to have a male slave with women, and you wanted to make sure that nothing
No
sexual was
funny
happening,
business. Yeah.
right? It was a way for them to kind of control that, I think,
Okay.
in certain situations. So that's not the best explanation of their roles, but it was one of these things that I think for most of the people that were placed in that role, it wasn't their choice and wasn't something that they would have been looking for.
And then I imagine maybe when they were no longer in those roles and they're kind of, sent out into civilization, they were looked at as different and judged. And I think that's probably what I was hitting on.
Well, I think
Okay.
so, because I think that's why what Jesus said was significant, because he's talking about people being born in a different way, or choosing that.
Right.
like choosing sexual abstinence, even maybe
Mm-hmm.
being asexual.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay. That makes sense, I think, to me. We'll see. I'll sleep on it.
There's more to learn. There's more
I
to learn
mean,
about eunuchs for both of us.
you could just start your own podcast on all the things, because I imagine there's an endless amount of information and things that we could talk about, truly. But my brain can only handle so much. Why do you think that there's so much fear around the trans community right now, especially from the far right? And we don't have to go into politics, but that is where we see a lot of the fear and the hatred coming from, and using religion to project that type of hate on the trans community. And because you've worked with people transitioning in your church, I think that perspective is going to be really helpful.
I kind of think that some people, I think in some ways, like these issues around fear get magnified. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's it's made out to be a bigger issue from a political perspective than what it really is for like most individual people
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
who are just living their lives. I don't think they think about it that much or are too concerned. But I remember like when I was living in New Orleans, there was a whole campaign about how you needed to protect your children from being possibly attacked by some trans person in a restroom,
Right.
right? And it was just they would play these commercials on the radio all of the time.
Oh no.
And so it's almost like a fear that's created that people didn't even have, it didn't exist before, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it generally, people are not, it's something that's totally not happening, right? There's no
Right.
evidence of people being attacked in bathrooms. Like it's not a real thing. It's extremely rare that anyone who identifies as transgender that they're predatory, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
usually actually people in the straight community.
Right.
So I think that people who want to use groups who want to scapegoat them and then use that for their own benefit,
Mm-hmm.
I think they're the ones actually that create a culture of fear that doesn't need to exist otherwise.
Right. And when you think about how many, like, I think about like my parents or whomever, like, how many trans people do they know? Zero, not one. So they aren't scared of trans people, but let's just say hypothetically they were. If you don't even know a trans person, you haven't even met a trans person, the likelihood of you running into a dangerous trans person in the bathroom is very rare. And, only 1% of the population is out as trans. And there's also people that don't even know a lesbian person or a gay person or non-binary. So it's like we are the smallest population that you should be worrying about, but you're absolutely right. It's just a narrative, it's a fear that's fabricated and
So, I mean,
no
I think
evidence.
people do sometimes have concerns about people that are different than them if
Mhm.
they don't understand. But I think that usually, like, people can get past that once they get to know each other.
Totally.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think that was the brilliance of Harvey Milk encouraging people to come out of the closet, right? To know us is to love us.
Right.
And like once you realize that like, oh, your gay friend is fabulous,
Mhm.
and is just like an awesome, kind, loving person who adds like a lot of sparkle and shine and love to the world,
Yeah.
then you don't have to worry as much
Yeah. It's just a
that you're going to
matter of
somehow be converted.
yeah. Listen, if it was that easy, I would have converted a lot of straight men to being gay by now. But there are some
Right?
straight men that are married to like acquaintances of mine that their wives have even said to me like, "Oh, my husband, he just didn't really like gays before, but like he met you and like you're pretty chill, you're cool." And I'm like, "All you have to do is talk to us and see what we're about instead of just assuming that some of them think we're going to try to like unzip their pants. Like that's not reality." And all
No.
you have to do is talk to a trans person or a gay person or anybody from the queer community to understand that we're just regular human beings. Truly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the more positive side of things. I am
Okay.
curious. What does it look like when LGBTQ plus people fully claim their faith instead of abandoning it? Because I think it's easy for a lot of us to just be like, no, not going down that road again. But you've worked with people and see people at your church that have reclaimed it, maybe renamed it, and found the joy in it again.
Yeah, I'm thinking of this specific gal I met in New Orleans, and she was raised in this very small conservative church in Louisiana. She had both of her parents had died when she was relatively young, so she was on her own. And then when she came out to her church and admitted that she was attracted to women, they kicked her out. And so at some point, she found us, and it wasn't long after her kind of being expelled out of her church. She kind of showed up on the door on my doorstep, right? I kind of walked with her through a period when she was healing from all of that judgment and hatred and grief that she had. So she had some serious depression. She was suicidal at one point. And actually, there were times when I really wasn't sure, like, if she was gonna make it.
Mm-hmm.
And, but, like, companioning her through that process, it got to the point where she had a lot of counseling, she had a lot of support through the healthcare system. She got a lot of love and acceptance, and I wanna say, like, family of choice kind of feeling at our
Mm-hmm.
church, like, being like, having parental figures even though we weren't the parents. So, I eventually got to the point where she met a woman and fell in love, and I was able to, like, co-officiate her wedding with her, and another gal, and for me, it's like that's what it can look like when people can reclaim their religious tradition. It
Mm-hmm.
can be a way for them to heal the way they've been harmed by it in the past,
Right.
judged by people, and that they can then, like, find love and thrive, and she's so happy now. She and her wife do work that they love, they travel, they go on these amazing vacations, like, and they're doing good deeds in the world, you
Mm-hmm.
know, so they're, like, associated with, like, the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, so they do a lot of, like, charity work, and they give back to their community, and they work in healthcare. It's just really, for me, even though that's an individual story, it's like take one individual story and imagine, like, that multiplied
Right.
within a community and the
Yeah.
change that that can create.
That's nice. It's like reclaiming, reinventing how you're gonna experience religion and finding that family that supports you. I was gonna say this little thing at the end, but this makes me think of it. It was in maybe a few episodes ago when I was researching people that had left conversion therapy, and one of the writers said that she decided to go to a new church one day, and she it was dancing and music and they were free, and then someone came up to her and was like, "We've been waiting for you." They could just, like, see her joy and her excitement, and I like, that I feel like lines up with the story you just told, and when I read that, I was like, "You need to pause recording because it made me really emotional," but it is just reclaiming it and renaming it and giving it a new type of being, and it can be, whatever you want it to be, really, I would imagine.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's cute. I like that. I love a happy end. That's not like a gross joke. I love a happy ending with a happy story and like happy people reclaiming, living, thriving, coming back from the darkness is what I meant by that. You know what I meant. Oh, Lord. How embarrassing for me. So, moving right along, how do you feel or how do you help queer folks understand that they're not just accepted, but like you said, celebrated by God, celebrated by you and your church?
So I think some of that is paying attention to um, what we are communicating um, on any given Sunday during a worship service, right? What are we teaching about? Are we teaching about love? Are we teaching about like how to make the world a better place around us? Are we teaching how to love our neighbors? Are we teaching about kindness? Are we creating an atmosphere and that feels positive and safe and loving and encouraging and uplifting? So I think for me, that's really what it's about is making sure that we're fostering that and making sure that those are the messages and that that's what people can connect with, that they can come and have an experience where they hear that they're loved and they feel that they're loved and they're embraced by community.
So are there any other examples that you've seen in your practice in your church where you're like, okay, this is what faith should look like? Other things that brought you joy and you're like, this is why I do this?
I am constantly amazed by how kind people in our community are. I guess I think of things like people in our church that are volunteers at organizations like Mama's Kitchen, that provides meals for people that are living with HIV/AIDS.
Hmm.
Or at one point, a lot of us were volunteering with Uptown Community Service Center, and that was like a nonprofit in the North Park area that was providing services for people experiencing homelessness. So, providing a mail service and showers and food and clothing. I see a lot of people in this community, I think, because they know what it's like to be judged or mistreated in certain ways, they can be really tender-hearted and really open to reaching out to care for people that
Hmm.
they see who are struggling around them in community. And to me, like that's exciting. Like that's where faith is lived.
Yeah, I like
Those are
that
some
example. Yeah.
examples.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
good. Kind of paying it forward. And
absolutely.
so I think a big part of why I also wanted to talk to you was to talk about people that maybe grew up in the church and haven't been there for a while because they are from the queer community and maybe don't feel comfy. So for someone who has maybe been hurt by religion but still feels spiritually curious, what would you say to them?
That there are ways to kind of explore your spirituality and think about the things that give your life meaning without necessarily having to go right back into a church. I mean, it may sound strange coming from me, but I also think that like there's something to be said for therapy with a really good counselor. I 100% endorse that and go to a counselor myself
Hmm.
and have gone to a few. So I really think that it makes a difference to work through some of those things. Um, Sometimes people will go to a spiritual director or they'll see somebody who has a spiritual background and kind of talk through some of the ways that they've been harmed instead of just going back into an environment that's going to feel triggering and that's going to
Right.
bring up trauma and pain for them. Um, I don't think we should feel like we have to re-injure ourselves in order to get healing.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I don't think we should feel like we can't explore when
Right.
healing is possible and our lives can improve when we're able to access more self-love because we've let past judgments that other people imposed on us go.
Yeah, I think everybody's, solution to re-exploring the religion, of course, is going to look different. But like you said, you went to a church that wasn't very fond of women, reading the scripture. So you left that, but you went somewhere that might have worked for you. And so perhaps somebody leaving the church that has been hurt or went to conversion therapy or their family doesn't accept them because of how they identify. Not every church is going to be like that. Doesn't mean you have to dive right back into one. Like you said, go to maybe a counselor or explore religion at home on your own. And there may come a time when you're comfy finding a church like yours that is more celebratory, but they're not all the same.
Because a lot of churches and organizations have their services online. They have what they believe online. And I think that's really helpful. Like people can do some research and they can look and see what's out there before they ever even like walk
Hmm.
through a door.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna research a hairstylist, so you may as well research your church and find out what's gonna work for you. That's my tip for,
So
for this
important.
episode. Yes. Research your highlights and research where you're gonna find Jesus. That's what we're gonna go with. Okay, moving along again. Is it okay, in your opinion, to like take a little break from faith, or if people decide to never return at all? How do you feel about that?
It's interesting because I was reflecting back on my own journey the other day. And because as I shared, I had lost this best friend to suicide. And then my father died like maybe about a year or so after that. I was in my early 20s. So I was really very young still. And so I had a lot of significant grief. And at the time I wasn't going to church because I had left church. And I actually encountered a transgender clergy person who I just met at work. And she was retired from being a pastor, but she would talk about her own kind of spiritual explorations and her own journey in her life. And she didn't do it in any way to I didn't feel like she was trying to convert me in some kind of way.
Hmm.
But then one day, like her partner invited me to come to church with them. And I think like if they hadn't done that and invited me to come, I might not have gone back to church.
Right.
But when I did go back, it became very healing for me because I was one of those kids that was bullied a lot. And I didn't have that experience of belonging where you're in community and people like love you and affirm you for the person you are and don't expect you to somehow be different. And so like to get to experience that was so healing. I think I don't know, I like to believe that there's a source of love in the world that wants us to get healing, that wants us to receive love and joy and all the good things in life. It doesn't mean we all have to find it the same way,
Hmm.
but I think it's good that when we can stay open to the possibility of it.
I'm glad you shared that story because my next question was going to touch on my experience, and I really don't want any of this to come across as offensive, but my experience with people that are pushy and just really trying to sell you on the gig. And then others, like you mentioned, your coworker that just invited you that didn't seem like, super preachy. I had neighbors that stopped me in the hall one day and were like, we've known you for a while and we've been meaning to ask you, do you know the gospel? And I was just like, I'm going to a meeting right now. Like I literally walking up the stairs with my dog. Like I'm about to jump into Zoom. Like I can't right now. This is like so out of nowhere. But then they just started telling me and they kept talking. And like to me, that felt like a little bit of an invasion. Like, I said I wasn't available right now. And we see that a lot. People blur the line between their passion and then being pushy with it. How do you feel about that? Just like on a personal level.
I mean, on a personal level, if somebody comes towards me with an agenda, it's a complete turn off. I don't even like it when somebody approaches me outside a grocery store with a clipboard.
Right.
Even
Yeah.
if it's something I might actually want to sign, I'm like,
Yeah.
"Why are you coming at me with
Please,
that
no.
clipboard
I'm
right
just
now?"
trying to
Like,
leave
I need
Trader
to
Joe's. No.
just like 100%. And so when people it really bothers me when people are aggressive about what they believe and when they become very like, I just need to convince you to see things from my perspective instead of like having a genuine conversation with you and getting to know who you are and
Mhm.
maybe learning something about what your experiences have been and like finding out about you and what might be meaningful to you.
Right.
uh, to me that's a totally different experience than when someone wants to like save your soul. And
Yes,
I
yes.
just that kind of approach is uh, to me, it can be really scary and overwhelming, and I think it pushes a lot of people away.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's definitely more intimidating than it is like, "Oh, let me explore this a little bit. It's more of a like, let me put up a wall and just kind of keep walking. I feel like now all these questions are coming to my mind that I like ask myself all the time, and I'm just gonna ask you because you're closer with Jesus than I am. But I always say there's so many religions in the world, right? There's a lot of division between these religions, people that make very big bold choices. They praise their god when they're performing acts of terrorism, things like this. What would you say, or how do you feel about there's so many gods, so many religions, so many things to believe in? How can everyone be right? We can't all be right, but we all can't all be wrong. Are we all just do you think we're all just praising the same being, or it gets really confusing and wishy-washy to me when I'm like, well, you believe in a different god, they're kind of similar, but we can't both be right.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think for me, I tend to think of God as like the source of love. And when I see good things happening in the world, I'm attributing that to God. So to me, that can be that kind of love, understanding, compassion, respect for humanity, a desire to care for others and show tenderness. Like to me, whenever that's expressed within a religion, that's that's God being
Okay.
expressed. And maybe we have different names for
Mhm.
God, but I feel like that's really for me what I see happening. And I know not everybody agrees,
Mhm.
but I think that when we can lean into into that idea, there's a lot more room for coming into places of agreement or alignment
Right.
when we can have meaningful conversations within religious traditions and support each other.
Right. I was actually just in New Orleans in October,
Oh
and I
wow.
did one of those, little spooky tours, and she was explaining voodoo and the history of voodoo, and it was still a ghost tour, but it was very historic, a lot of information that I really enjoyed, and kind of comparing modern Christianity to the practice of voodoo, the similarities. And then when you look at all religion, like more than anything, there's all of these similarities, and just like it seems like a slight change or a slight translation or a little thing is like a little bit different. But really, when I think about what I pray to or talk to, it's the universe. But I think it's the same God that you are praying to, or that the person down the street is. I'm the universe to me is God.
I had a friend who she used to call God like Gomu, which was like God of my understanding.
Oh, I like
And I yeah.
that. That's good.
And I really liked that because I
Yeah,
feel like that's kind of like the way I don't know, it's a beautiful way to express, I think, what
yeah.
we're talking about.
So we'll call him Gomu from here on out, God of my understanding. But if Gomu could say one thing directly to the LGBTQ plus people who were told that they were wrong for being who they are, what do you think that he may say or that they may say?
I think it would be love yourself, celebrate who you are, allow yourself to fall in love with who you fall in love with.
Mm-hmm.
Look for the things in life that give you joy and celebrate the experience of being alive and savor it because every moment is precious.
I like that. That's good. I agree. I think Gomu would say that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, and then is there anything that's giving you hope right now when it comes to faith and the queer community, aside from all the wonderful things that you've shared that you've experienced at your church? Is there anything that really keeps you pushing ahead, keeps you, practicing and sharing your beliefs?
Sometimes it's small things like kind of you reaching out and saying, "Hey, I'd love to do this podcast and interview you." That's encouraging to me because it tells me that like kind of the recognition, the acknowledgement, there's another person out there saying, "I love us. I love this community. I want to support this community. I want us to fully thrive." And like the more of that I see, the more hope I have.
Mm-hmm. That's
So
cool.
even
I like
though,
that.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
I just
mean,
got chills everywhere. Yeah, that's really interesting because, like, Yeah, I mean, something made me, message your church. I looked at the website, I saw your picture, something made me message so that I could try to have this type of conversation and for you to feel, joy or called to be like, okay, we're on the right path. But then to think of all the people that are going to listen that this may touch or affect, or they may forward it to a friend or a family member who could use this message is actually a really cool thought.
Yes, it
Yeah,
is.
that's neat. Let's talk about your church because
Okay.
I want to know a little bit more about your church. And then you also have your Christmas Eve mass
Right.
here in San
So
Diego.
our
So let's promote that baby.
okay. Well, so we are at if you're taking the 5, we're right off the Claremont Drive exit. So we're located on Denver Street, like right across from Mission Bay. And so it's 2633 Denver Street is our address. And our website is www.themetchurch.org. We are doing a Christmas Eve service, which I believe is at 5:30. Can you believe I didn't look this up
That's
before
okay.
this
They can check
interview?
the website, themetchurch.org.
Right.
We'll find it somewhere. I'll put it in my outro. We'll make sure that I recap.
So much.
And what can people
Yes.
expect when they come on Christmas Eve?
I think they can expect a lot of warmth. We have a candlelight Christmas Eve service. So we're going to do some of the traditional Christmas hymns that you might expect to hear at Christmas time. We do tend to inclusify some of the words to our hymns, right? So things that are kind of based in oppression, we don't like that.
Mhm.
So we do change some lyrics to songs at times. Um, but we also generally have communion. So we do generally like offer communion during our Christmas Eve service. We're going to have a children's message. So I'm going to have some gifts for any youngsters who come.
Cute.
And yeah, there's going to be
Love that.
a lot of love and goodness.
Perfect. And it's like non-denominational, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. 'Cause you said you get a whole wide variety of people from all different backgrounds and beliefs.
Do. I mean, we're primarily Christian, but we also like are very open to people who are not Christian coming and being a part of our community and attending.
Right.
Anyone is welcome.
Yeah. Well, I'll make sure to put, if anyone listening, go to the social medias. I'll make sure I'll tag you guys on the posts and whatnot. And I'll put a little thing in the description of this episode so listeners can scroll down and go right to your website to find out what time that Christmas Eve service begins. But the information will be there. But before we leave, is there anything else you feel like you want to say, or maybe we didn't touch on anything that you feel? And if not, that's totally fine too.
I guess I just want to thank you. Thank you for being open to having this conversation and for being open minded to kind of explore your own feelings about religion,
Hmm.
to explore and look at the topic of conversion therapy, to put out there the experiences that people have had, and but also to give people a way to see that it doesn't all have to be negative.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you doing that.
Right. Well, thank you for thanking me. But thank you for being here because I genuinely feel like I learned a lot today. I feel like I've learned a lot this month, and I think some of my perspectives have shifted. It's very easy to jump into the negative side of any theme, of any topic, because there's almost always more to explore there than there is this positive light side. You sometimes need to dig for it and search for it. But I'm glad that you were willing to share your experience and your knowledge and your education with me and my listeners. And I definitely think that I think we learned a lot today. And it doesn't have to be dark. You can make anything light and joyful and happy and celebratory.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Josh.
thank
Yes.
you. Well, maybe next Christmas, next December, we'll revisit this and we'll do another little holiday spectacular.
I would love
I love
that.
that. There's so much to cover, so there's plenty to talk about. But thank you so much for being here, and I hope that everyone goes to your Christmas Eve celebration, and that's it. We're good.
All right,
We're golden.
Josh.
And there you have it. If there's one takeaway that I hope sticks with you from this episode, it's this: faith does not have to hurt to be real. Queer people are not a footnote, a loophole, or a theological problem. We are loved, we are whole, and worthy exactly as we are. And whether you reconnect with faith or you redefine it or leave it behind entirely, you get to choose what feels safe and life giving for you. If this conversation cracks something open for you or gently challenged something that you were taught, I would love to hear about it. Submit your listener stories on my website, hotairwithjoshuarobert.com. And of course, follow me on Instagram and TikTok at _hotairpod. And one last thing, if you are in the San Diego area, the Metropolitan Community Church is hosting their Christmas Eve service at 5 p.m. on December 24th. It's inclusive, affirming, and open to everyone. You can find more details at themetchurch.org. So thank you for listening, for being open. I really opened myself up in this conversation. It felt like a very different conversation than any other guest that I have had, because this is something I don't know anything about. And frankly, I don't know if I will explore more. I'm not a very religious person, but I think it's really important that we shared a positive side of religion so that anybody listening who may be from the queer community understands that they can go back to religion should that be calling them. So, explore your options is really the message. Even if it's a little uncomfortable, explore your options. And as always, be gentle with yourself, drink some water, and remember that love was always the point. And Merry fucking Christmas. Am I allowed to say that? Happy holidays, whatever it is that you celebrate. The next episode is going to come out after Christmas. So this will be your last time hearing my voice before Jesus's birthday. And we're going to get into some other topics for the last two episodes of December. Jesus, we are putting you on the back burner. I also don't know if I should say that. We're putting you on the shelf. We're putting you away for the rest of the year. I will not be talking about Jesus until next December. I think I've had enough. And yes, I need to go probably repent for a lot of things that I've said. So anyway, I will talk to you all next time on Hot Air. Again, I'm Joshua Robert. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next Tuesday.